Tonight, an unsettling quiet hangs over a nation watching its leaders engage in a battle that threatens more than just political careers. It strikes at the very heart of our democracy. The recent dispute between President Donald Trump and California Governor Gavin Newsom began over immigration-related protests in Los Angeles, but it has quickly morphed into something far more dangerous. It has become a stark and public display of division, a test of our country's foundational principles. The core of the disagreement centers on a decision that should never be taken lightly: the deployment of federal troops on American soil, a move that pits federal authority against state sovereignty in a dramatic and concerning fashion. The escalation was swift and severe. President Trump, citing unrest and the actions of some protesters, made the unilateral decision to deploy thousands of National Guard members and Marines to Los Angeles. This was done without the consent of Governor Newsom, who immediately decried the action as a flagrant overreach of power. The president invoked a legal provision to justify his actions, framing the situation as a rebellion that required a firm and decisive federal response. This single act drew a line in the sand, creating a constitutional crisis that has left citizens caught in the middle, wondering where the authority of their state ends and the power of the federal government begins. Governor Newsom's response was equally forceful, framing the deployment not as a measure for safety, but as a politically motivated assault on California's autonomy. He publicly labeled the move a power grab and accused the president of manufacturing a crisis for his own political gain. His administration didn't just speak out, it took legal action, filing a lawsuit to halt the military's involvement. This legal challenge transformed a political feud into a formal battle in the courts, asking a judge to rule on the very limits of presidential power within a state's borders, a question that has echoed throughout American history. This conflict is not happening behind closed doors. It is unfolding in real time on our screens, through social media posts, and in fiery press conferences. We see two of our nation's most powerful leaders locked in a standoff, each unwilling to yield, each convinced of their own righteousness. The dispute over a phone call they shared on June 6th, where each man claims a different story was told, perfectly illustrates the deep chasm of distrust that now separates them. For the American people, this public spectacle is not just political theater. It is a worrying sign that the fundamental trust required for our government to function is eroding before our very eyes. The language used in this conflict has been as jarring as the actions themselves, descending into a level of personal animosity rarely seen in mainstream American politics. The rhetoric has moved beyond simple disagreement into the realm of dangerous provocation. President Trump has employed deeply inflammatory terms, referring to protesters as animals and a foreign enemy, while branding Governor Newsom with the derogatory nickname Newscum. These are not just insults, they are words designed to dehumanize opponents and escalate tensions. When a president suggests a governor should be arrested, even if later clarified, it crosses a line that moves our nation closer to the authoritarianism we have always stood against. On the other side, Governor Newsom has responded with equally grave warnings, accusing the president of behaving like the leader of an authoritarian regime. He has declared that democracy is under assault, a powerful and frightening statement coming from the governor of our nation's most populous state. By daring the administration to come after me, arrest me, he intentionally elevated the stakes, painting himself as a defender of freedom against a tyrannical force. While his supporters see this as principled defiance, it also contributes to the escalating cycle of confrontation, where compromise becomes impossible and the political battlefield expands, leaving little room for peaceful resolution or governance. This war of words has real-world consequences, fueling a narrative of an America that is hopelessly and irreconcilably divided. Every harsh tweet and every fiery speech widens the gap, not just between two leaders, but between the citizens who support them. It creates an environment where political opponents are seen as enemies of the state, not as fellow Americans with different ideas. This erosion of civility is toxic. It poisons the public square and makes the essential work of governing nearly impossible. When leaders refuse to engage with respect, they teach their followers to do the same, fostering a culture of contempt that undermines our shared democratic values. Consider the planned military parade in Washington, D.C. this coming Saturday. What President Trump sees as a patriotic celebration of our country, Governor Newsom condemns as a vulgar display reminiscent of dictators. This single event encapsulates the entire conflict. one action is viewed through two completely opposing lenses, with no common ground in sight. The president's warning that protests at the event will be met with even greater force only deepens the sense of dread. This is not the language of a unified nation. It is the language of a country bracing for an internal collision, driven by leaders who have chosen confrontation over cooperation. We must remember that this bitter feud is not occurring in a vacuum. The entire world is watching. For generations, the United States has been held up, rightly or wrongly, as a beacon of democracy and a model of stable governance. Nations striving for freedom have looked to our system, our peaceful transitions of power, and our ability to debate fiercely, yet remain united as one people. But what do they see now? They see a president and a prominent governor engaged in a public brawl that threatens the very stability they once admired. They see military forces being deployed against the wishes of a state leader, a scenario that looks disturbingly familiar to those living in less democratic nations. This is a moment of profound shame for a country that has long lectured others on the importance of democratic norms and the rule of law. The spectacle of our leaders trading insults and threatening legal action against one another provides ammunition for autocratic regimes around the globe. It allows them to point to the United States and say, "See, democracy is chaotic and dysfunctional. Our way is better." Every time President Trump calls Governor Newsom incompetent, or Governor Newsom accuses the president of authoritarianism, it weakens America's moral authority on the world stage. Our allies watch with concern, while our adversaries watch with glee. The damage being done extends far beyond our borders and will last long after this specific crisis has passed. Our credibility is on the line. How can we effectively advocate for human rights in other countries when our own leaders are publicly discussing the arrest of political opponents? How can we promote free and fair elections abroad when our own political discourse has become so toxic and polarized? The world is taking note of this hypocrisy, and our ability to lead, to inspire, and to build alliances is being diminished with every passing day. This conflict is not just an internal affair. It is a self-inflicted wound to our international standing. Therefore, this is more than just a political fight. It is a test of our national character. Are we the nation that can withstand deep disagreements and find a way to work together for the common good? Or have we become so fractured that our own system is beginning to crumble from within? The nations of the world are waiting for an answer. They are watching to see if the American experiment, once a source of global inspiration, has become a cautionary tale. The responsibility to prove that our democracy is resilient rests squarely on the shoulders of the leaders who have brought us to this perilous moment. The time for escalation has passed. The time for leadership has come. It is imperative that both President Trump and Governor Newsom recognize that their duty is not to their party or their political base, but to the American people they were elected to serve. True leadership is not measured by the ability to win a public argument, but by the wisdom to know when to seek common ground. Our system of government was designed for disagreement and debate, but it was also built on the foundation of compromise. It is a system that requires our leaders to rise above personal grievances for the good of the entire country. Citizens across the United States, regardless of their political affiliation, depend on a functioning government. They rely on the promise that their leaders, even in moments of intense conflict, will uphold their oaths and protect the institutions of our democracy. This public feud undermines that fundamental trust. It suggests that personal power and political victory have become more important than the stability and well-being of the Republic. We must demand more from those in power. We must remind them that they are temporary stewards of a democracy that has been entrusted to them, a precious inheritance they are obligated to preserve, not endanger. This moment should serve as a wake-up call for all of us. It demonstrates how fragile our democracy can be and how quickly the norms that sustain it can be shattered. The path from heated disagreement to constitutional crisis is shorter than we might think. It is a path paved with inflammatory rhetoric, personal attacks, and an unwillingness to listen. To step back from this brink, we need statesmanship, not gamesmanship. We need a renewed commitment to the idea that we are all Americans first, and that the bonds that unite us are stronger than the political forces that seek to tear us apart. Ultimately, American democracy should be an example for the world, not a warning. Its strength lies in its ability to contain and resolve conflict peacefully, through dialogue and respect for the rule of law. When our leaders abandon these principles, they risk everything. The responsibility now is to de-escalate, to open lines of communication, and to remember that the true enemies are not fellow Americans with whom we disagree, but the division and hatred that threaten to undo us all. The future of our democracy depends not on who wins this fight, but on whether our leaders have the courage to end it.